All right, what's going on, guys? So we're officially 3 days away from Champs 2025. So I think it's a perfect time that we start getting into some pick'ems. So without any further ado, I'm just going to jump into it. This might be a little bit of a longer video, but I want to make sure that we talk about all the different teams here and I can give my thoughts on them. So let's just jump into it. Group A, we got PRX, XLG, GX, and Sentinels. So I think this group is going to be pretty straightforward. Let me just jump into it. I think off rip, we all have to say PRX going to take number one slot. They're going to go 4-0. I mean, PRX has looked fantastic lately. They've had great performances in the region, VCT. They fell a little bit short at EWC, losing to, I think, Fnatic and Gen G. But honestly, they've been doing pretty well in the interim. Masters Toronto, they looked great as well. I think that they won the entire event, if I'm not mistaken, right? Heck yeah, they won Masters Toronto. PRX is one of those teams that you really cannot count them out, especially when it comes to international play. They usually are pretty consistent in how they perform. All right, so number two I'm going to put on this list is a little bit of a toss-up, but I have Sentinels moving on. So the only reason I say it's a little bit of a toss-up because of these two teams, Sentinels and Giants. So Sentinels, I think, is a great team. They usually perform pretty well at internationals, and overall they do pretty well. That being said, recently Sentinels hasn't not been looking too great within VCT Americas. I've been watching their last few games, and they've been keeping matches close, but I just haven't been impressed by some of the stuff that I've been seeing. They seem out of form, which could be, it could be a little bit of like they're holding stuff in the back pocket for champs. This VCT season, they may not be, those last two matches, they may not have been trying 100%. I mean, just taking a look at like their recent matches, if we look up Sentinels real quick over here on VLR, Sentinels, they've been doing okay. My only concern is they've lost to two other teams that are going to be attending this event, namely G2 and NRG. The NRG loss was what gave me a little bit of concern. Sentinels during this game did not look fantastic. Now, that's not a slight at NRG because they did play out of their minds this game. But I don't know. Sentinels just like has not been very impressive. I mean, losing a map to 2G, who is like definitely not the strongest competition here. I mean, they've been doing okay. But like even going back to like previous international events, they took a loss to BBL in overtime. I mean, they lost to PRX, but it's PRX. PRX is definitely like a cut above. But like they had a quarterfinals run in EWC. Like I don't know. I have a feeling that Sentinels isn't going to perform at this event. I mean, Masters Toronto, again, they did okay. They dropped to Fnatic, who has like also not been in amazing form lately. But I don't know. Yeah, just Sentinels has not been impressing me lately. I feel like they've been making a lot of mistakes. I feel like they haven't been looking like 100% like in form as they normally do. I feel like they're in a similar situation to Fnatic, who has also not been doing well. So that's why I'm hesitant to give them the number 2 spot, but I will do it anyway. It's a little bit of NA bias, but I do think Sentinels, there is the possibility that they are holding stuff in the back pocket to then bring out during champs. But it's remained to be seen. Giants is another one that I think could easily, these two teams could be very interchangeably. I think very easily they could be interchanged. Giants hasn't been doing well, but they've shown signs of life. So Giants is another team that I feel like has been showing signs of life and look to be in a decent state. Now, while they didn't have like a very great run at EWC, only playing 3 matches, getting knocked out by Na'Vi, I think their performance at home in VCT EMEA has like gives me some hope. Now, granted, Sentinels has been performing better than Giants has, but I think it's also safe to say VCT America isn't as competitive as I feel like VCT EMEA is. I feel like EMEA is a little bit of a stronger region, especially these days. But what gives me more, I guess, hope is the match that they had against Team Liquid. These 3 maps were extremely close, and I think could have gone either way. So Giants is a roster that has been showing a lot of signs of life. BBL, they had a dominant performance against BBL, who is by no means a bad team in my opinion, and went on to 2-0 Fnatic earlier in their playoff run. So I think Giants has potential to surprise a lot of people, and I would even say Giants could be a dark horse. I wouldn't say a dark horse for the entire event, but I think Giants will do a lot better than most people will give them credit for. Now, that brings me to XLG. And I'm going to be completely honest here. XLG, I do not know a lot about this team. I don't know a lot about most of the Chinese teams. But taking a look at their VLR, they have not looked fantastic. Taking losses to JDG, Edward Gaming, DRG twice back-to-back, and then losing to Sentinels and DRX at EWC. I just don't see XLG really being like that impactful at champs. And then they had a nasty losing streak from Masters Toronto up to what is Hero Esports ACL 25. I don't even know what this event is. But like 4 nasty losses in a row at like international level events to G2, Sentinels, DRX, and PRX. So it just doesn't bode well for this team. I don't think XLG is going to really come in and surprise anybody. I think they're going to be a very easy, just out in groups kind of pick, no brainer. So let's move on to Group B. Group B is one that's going to be a little bit more competitive. So let's just jump into it. Again, this might be a little bit controversial, but I've actually got Billy taking the number 1 slot for Group B. Billy is one of those teams that they always seem to impress at international events. I actually have not been keeping up with how this team is doing, but BLG is one of those one of those teams that they just kind of come in and surprise people. I remember their debut international event versus NRG. They were just absolutely blasting these guys, and have gone on to like impress from that point on. Given the rest of the competition in this group, I think it's safe to say that Billy will wind up making out of groups. Whether they make it out first or second is kind of remain to be seen. And the only reason that I would say I have them taking number 1 is mainly because of my number 2 spot. And my number 2 spot is going to go to Fnatic. So the reason I don't have Fnatic number 1 is Fnatic has not been looking great in EMEA. So let's go ahead and pull up their matches. Taking a look at here at Fnatic. Fnatic, I feel like it's been very wishy-washy. I feel like they really shouldn't have lost to Giants given the pedigree that's with this team. So I feel like Fnatic can be a little wishy-washy given the pedigree that's on this team. And the main reason I'm saying this is because I know Fnatic isn't 100% happy with how they've been playing as a roster. So it's kind of, I feel like they're in a weird state in terms of like they could do well and they could be again like a roster that could go on and win this whole thing. They're contenders, but I don't believe they're a favorite by any means. I think, they had solid performances in EMEA, a couple losses here and there, a decent EWC playoff run, making it all the way grand finals and losing to Team Heretics. I don't know. I've got an eerie feeling that Fnatic isn't gonna do well. And call it what you may, coach's intuition or just blind paranoia. I don't feel like Fnatic is in top form, and I feel like I've been hearing murmurs of a similar sentiment coming from the team. Not that I have any ties or anything, but via social media and whatnot. I just feel like that team is not happy with how they're performing, and that could affect their posture going into champs, which is why I have them at number 2. All right, so number 3, I think, is going to be RRQ. So RRQ is another kind of a question mark, in my opinion. They're a team that I actually don't know a ton about, but they're coming from a pretty strong region. They're coming out of the Pacific, so they're contending with teams like PRX, Talon, T1, DRX, Gen G, and taking wins against a lot of the teams that I've mentioned. That being said, where things fall off for RRQ is at the international level, dropping 0-2 to Heretics. Let me actually show this here. Dropping 0-2 to Heretics, dropping 0-2 to NRG, 1-2 to Fnatic, and 0-2 to Wolves, all at international events. It doesn't bode well for this team. And then sometimes this is something that you just kind of have happen in esports, where these teams like this will do well in their home region, but when they escape that home region and go to international play, they just don't perform well. And I think RRQ might land in that bucket. That being said, leading up to champs, they've been looking decent. Wins against Gen G, DRX, T1, and Talon, who are no slouches by any means. But again, when they get to a team that is at an international contending favorite level team, they don't do that well, as like PRX. So I don't know. I don't have a lot of confidence in RRQ. I know a lot of people do like them going into this event. Unfortunately, I'm not one of those people. And we have MIBR. MIBR has been a mess. And I don't think anyone is really questioning this. MIBR has just not been doing well at all. At home, at EWC. They've just been having a really abysmal run, and they've been having problems with this roster. Just only taking wins versus Loud and 100 Thieves. Now, the 100 Thieves win, I'll give them credit. That is not a bad team. Loud, on the other hand, another team that's not really been doing that great. I don't know. MIBR is just a team that has not been looking fantastic. They were doing okay a little earlier on, but we're already looking back a couple months ago. This team is not the same team it was. Now, could they surprise everybody? Yes. The 100% MIBR could come out swinging, and be like this Goliath that no one knew was there. Do I think that's going to happen? Not really. I think the match history speaks for itself. The state of the rosters can speak for itself. I just don't have much hope. So that's my Group B. Moving on to Group C. Now, Group C, I think, is very interesting. There is a lot that can happen here. And I don't really know how to call this one. I'm going to give you guys my best guess and impressions, how I think it's going to go. So bear with me a little bit. So for number one, I'm going to take Team Liquid. Team Liquid have been looking great. They just won it all in VCT EMEA. They've been looking solid. Definitely a team that's on an upward trajectory. That being said, let's just hope it's not momentum. Let's hope they can keep that momentum moving forward, but let's hope the transition to international play, going to champs, playing these different teams and all these different style of plays doesn't have them run into a brick wall. I do think that's possible. Do I think it's likely? Not really. Okay, so here we are. Team Liquid, again, won it all in VCT EMEA, so they're looking like a strong team coming out of their region. That being said, the only room for pause is their international performance. EWC didn't do that well, and they played two teams that are from their region. They lost to teams in their region. Oh, this is a qualifier, excuse me. Regardless, like when it comes up to that next step of going to international play, it seems like they fall flat a little bit. Even at Masters Toronto, didn't do that well. Only team they beat at Masters Toronto was MIBR, and we already talked about the state that team's in. I just don't think... I think Liquid have been, again, on an upward trajectory. This was a few months ago since we saw a last round of international play. But it's kind of up in the air how this team will do. I think if VCT EMEA Stage 2 is any indication, I think this team will come in strong. I think they will move out of their group. I don't think there's really much chance of them not making it out of groups. It's just how far they're going to go beyond that fact. But I do think Team Liquid looks good going into champs. My only concern is those international stage nerves. So moving on, I think, and this one might be a little bit of a crazy take, I've actually got DRX in number 2. DRX is one of those teams that I've always been happy and excited to watch them play. When it comes to international play, DRX always seems to perform. And let's take a look at their VLR. Okay, so DRX, like I said, is one of those teams that seems to always perform at internationals. Now, they didn't have the greatest EWC, pretty abysmal performance versus Sentinels, and an okay performance versus BBL. Yeah, they went out 0-2, but one of these maps did go into overtime, so it could have gone either way. But DRX is one of those teams when they show up at champs or masters, they usually have something in their back pocket lined up. And I've never been disappointed watching this team at the international level. Again, this was a few months ago since we saw some international play out of this roster. And they did take some losses recently to another team that is going to be at this event in RRQ. That being said, I do think the DRX can stomach, if that's the proper word, these teams that they're playing. I do think they have a proper chance. Now, part of the reason that I have them going number 2 is, again, kind of similar to Group B, my third pick. And that's going to be NRG. NRG, man, I don't really know how to feel about NRG. This team has been doing well recently in VCT, not EMEA, Americas. So they've been doing well at VCT Americas. But when I go to the international play, again, it's like, I don't know. I don't have faith that this team is going to do well at champs. And I don't call it intuition again, but the wins that they took in VCT Americas, I don't know. I haven't been all that impressed. I don't think Sentinels played well this game. Cloud9 has not been a great team thus far. Leviathan is also in shambles. The only thing that I will give them props for are the wins versus G2 because they are consistent. G2 did make some pretty dumb decisions during this match. I got to watch the bind and the ascent. And G2 could have very easily won that game. There were just some bad decisions being made. But I think that is just like a chronic G2 problem. I don't know what to tell you. I feel like NRG and DRX could be interchangeable. I do think, depending on some matchups, or not some matchup, depending on, let's take a look at the bracket real quick. NRG, yeah, that's the thing. NRG's first game is my biggest question mark in this tournament. They're playing EDG. I do not know how EDG is going to look during this event. EDG won champs last year, but I haven't been keeping up with this region. So it's hard for me to really put any big stake on them, on that team, one way or the other. And that's just being honest. I do have Team Liquid beating DRX, and I do have NRG beating EDG. That's where things kind of get, where the lines blur. Because NRG is one of those teams that they can step up to the plate. So if they're playing top level talent, I feel like NRG is one of those teams that they rise to the level of the team they're playing. So if they're playing G2, they'll play as good as G2. If they play, a DRX, or they play let's give someone in their region. If they play a Leviathan maybe, or maybe not Leviathan, but like a Sentinels, they'll play at that level. Like, even though they have a higher peak, they'll play to their opponent on that same level. And that's my cause for concern with NRG. I also think playing these different regions could give them some weird looks that they may not necessarily be prepared for. I do think NRG will contend better. I think NRG and Team Liquid is definitely a better matchup than NRG EDG, for NRG, I mean. But this group is kind of a big question mark. I do think it is possible for NRG to make it out of groups, but I also think it's possible for DRX. DRX is one of those teams that every time you count them out, you wind up regretting it. So that's kind of like, that's where I'm at it with it. EDG, I'm going to have them going out in groups. Let's see. VCT China, they made it to, what is this? Lower bracket final, losing to Billy, who I have as a favorite coming out of their group. And then a lot of weird losses, losing to DRG, who is also at champs, but I don't have them coming out of their group, and you'll see why in a minute. But there's a lot. I'm seeing a lot of red on this match page here, in this match history. I also want to mention that they didn't even make it out of groups at EWC. Again, this is a few months ago, and they did lose twice to Genji, which is a little rough. But I don't know. I just don't have Edward Gaming doing all that well. And then last time we saw them at an international before EWC was Masters Bangkok, and even there they didn't do stellar. They did okay, but this is the kind of era of them like this. This is the era of them like coming out of champs. Like, they were still in like pretty peak form. So I just don't think EDG is in a spot that they'll do well at champs, especially given Team Liquid and NRG in their group. I think the NRG EDG matchup is a big question mark, but I don't see EDG beating DRX, if I'm being absolutely honest. All right, so we have Group D, the group of death. I would really hate to be in this group if I were any of these teams. So let's get into it. I'm going to be, if anyone's watched any of my live streams or anything like that, you know I am a big G2 fan. I love G2. I've been a fan of G2 since they were the guard. But being a fan, I'm also a big critic. I think G2, they're a great team. They play really well, but they are an emotional team. And I feel like hubris can be their downfall. I see that when they feel like they're better than another team or they're playing well, they make mistakes. And at this level of play, that could be really, really punishing. So that's my only cause for concern. That being said, I don't see G2 losing to DRG and T1. Team Heretic, that's another big question mark. But I think Team Heretics, this one's a toss-up as to like, but this is how I think it's going to go. Team Heretics, G2, I think are going. The only reason I have Team Heretics moving on is because Team Heretics is a very consistent team. At international play, they do well. That team is like, even if they have ups and downs, this team consistently does well at international play. This team also does consistently well when they play high-level competition. Even if they don't win all their matches, they keep them close. And Team Heretics is one of those teams that you know they're going to come into this with like they're going to have stuff in their back pocket. And I don't know how well G2 is going to contend with that. I think G2 is a great team. They're the best team in their region. But I don't know. Part of me feels like while the roster itself isn't young in the sense that they've been together a while, there is a lot of young players on that team. And that can lead to emotions, and emotional players and young players, it can be make or break at international level play, at that high level of play. That's what I think. I think G2 can do it. I think it's possible for G2 to come out first and beat Heretics. I mean, let's take a look at the last matchups. When have these guys last played each other? I mean, yeah, take a look at like their previous international event. They lost to Billy Billy. They lost to Carmine Corp. Down to back to Masters Toronto. They lost to Fnatic. They beat Genji, which is no slouch. XLG is okay, and they beat PRX, which is like nothing to slouch at either. I don't even think G2 has ever faced off against Team Heretics. So it's like that like going into the unknown. And Team Heretics is one of those teams, when they're firing on all cylinders, they are really firing. I don't know. I think it's going to be a toss-up. I mean, it's Team Heretics. This team has always been good. This has always been one of the strongest teams, if not the strongest teams in EMEA. So it's kind of a toss-up. You have an EMEA Titan going against an America's Titan. And I think the EMEA Titan, Team Heretics, is more proven at the international level. G2 is a great team. They have the potential to beat Team Heretics, but given their recent performances at international events and like some of the things and tendencies I see with this roster, this is how I foresee this playing out. Now, let's get to the rest of the story. T1, DRG. I don't think anyone's really questioning that part. T1's a good team. They're not better than G2. They're not better than Heretics. Just flat out. I think it's pretty cut and dry on that front. And DRG have not been looking fantastic within their own region, let alone international play. I think T1 will just come into it looking in stronger form. But at the end of the day, I have them both going out in groups. So these are my picks for champs Again, brief recap. I got PRX advancing in first seed, Sentinels going second seed, but they could easily flip flop with Giants. I don't think Sentinels is in peak form. I haven't been very impressed with how they've been playing lately. Even though the match history looks good, they just haven't been looking as clean as they normally do and have been in the past. I've seen the Sentinels peak, and they are not at the Sentinels peak right now, which is cause for concern. Giants, on the other hand, is kind of in that same boat. They faced off during they faced off versus Team Liquid in EMEA finals. They looked solid in that matchup. I think Giants is on an upward trajectory, but it might be momentum. So let's see if they can keep that momentum going into champs. So this is a big question mark. I think it could be either of these two teams. On that front, for your own picks, I'd say pick your favorite. Pick your region. So yeah, XLG is not an impressive team. They've not been doing well. They're coming out of a slightly weaker region. So I have them going out like 0-4 or 0-3, excuse me. All right, so Group B. Billy taking first spot. Fnatic, I got taken second. Billy has been one of the strongest teams in the Chinese region. They consistent international play. They're always a wild card when it comes to international play. They're always surprising me when I watch them play. And a Fnatic that is also kind of in the same boat as Sentinels in that I don't feel like they're in peak form. I've seen peak Fnatic, even though the match history looks good. I've seen peak Fnatic. This isn't peak Fnatic. And I think BLG gave peak Fnatic a run for the money. I think it could be very interesting. That being said, I don't have Fnatic losing to RRQ. RRQ, I feel like, is a newer team to international play. Even though they have been to international play, I don't feel like they have the same pedigree that Fnatic does. And off of that just experience the repetitions of being at internationals, like, hey, we've done this before. Let's just go through it. Even if they're not in peak form, I think they're better than RRQ. MIBR has been they've been a mess. Let's not beat up on them too much. I'm sure they get beat up on enough on socials. They just haven't been looking good. Haven't been looking good at home. Haven't been looking good at international play. Had a really bad EWC performance. That roster is probably going to make several moves and has been making moves for a good while now. So we'll just see how it goes. I'm not very hopeful for MIBR, and I don't think many people are. Group C, I think this one's a little bit of a question mark outside of the first seed. First seed, Team Liquid. Team Liquid just won VCT EMEA. They've been on an upward trajectory. This team has been looking strong, and they've just been looking better and better. They're looking like they've built up steam. I don't feel like it's momentum because we've gradually been seeing this upward trend over some time, and now that seems like they're hitting their stride. NRG, I have going second, mainly because of their matchup. The only reason I have NRG, okay, so NRG is like a big question mark for me. I really wanted to put DRX number 2, but NRG, you can't lie. NRG has looked well, is playing well. They've taken wins multiple times versus G2, who is one of my favorites to win this event. So you can't really ignore that. While I do think NRG has been playing some teams that haven't been in peak form, and I feel like the Americas region as a whole hasn't been looking that great lately. NRG did win Americas, so you can't really count that out. That being said, I feel like they don't do great at international play. Yeah, I just don't feel like NRG does well at international play. And then when you look at DRX is one of those teams, when it comes to international play, every time I've counted DRX out and really thought that team wasn't going to do anything or wouldn't turn any heads, they always surprise me. So it's that kind of like DRX factor of like international play, it's champs. I don't know. I think DRX has the potential to surprise some people, but we'll see. We're going to go for the smartest move here. I think NRG is the smart move, regardless of what my gut says. EDG, yeah, they did well at champs a year ago, but they hadn't done well in international play in a while. They haven't been looking good at home. I think this is pretty cut and dry. I don't think EDG is going to do well. I know a lot of people have EDG a little higher up on this list, but against Team Liquid and NRG, I mean, I don't think it bodes well for them. I think EDG has potential in this map 1 to throw some weird stuff at NRG they may not be ready for, and that would be their only saving grace. But I don't think EDG is looking better than DRX or Team Liquid. So for that and the question mark around their NRG game, for that, this is kind of where I have them at. Group D, I got Team Heritage moving on first, G2 taking second, T1 and DRG taking third and fourth. I think this is a pretty rough group to be a part of. Team Heretics, they are experienced. They've been to international before. They're one of the strongest groups strongest teams in EMEA. Have always performed at international events. They've been there. They've done that. Team Heretics they're just kind of a cut above. G2 has been, in my opinion, unproven at internationals. They do well at internationals in terms of like masters or champs. They've mid to champs before with this roster. But I do think, like, from things that I've seen as like a G2 fan, this roster is very arrogant, and I'm very concerned about where that arrogance is going to land them, because it causes them to make mistakes. That being said, it's champs. Teams will come into this with a much different mentality than they will for their like home region matches or even like an EWC. So we'll see. I just think G2 is not as proven at internationals as Team Heretics is, and it's for that reason I have this set the way they are. I do think a G2 Heretics matchup could go either way, but going with my gut and what I think is the safe bet, this is what I got. T1 and DRG, there's not much of a story here. I think T1 looks like a decent team, but they just simply got a really bad group. I think if they were in any one of these other groups, we'd have a different conversation as to like where T1 was going to land. But given the group, I don't think it bodes well. They're just kind of victims to circumstance at this point. And DRG the region is not that strong. They haven't been doing well in their region. They haven't been doing well at international events. I think DRG is another pretty easy 0-3. So yeah, those are my thoughts, guys. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Tell me if you think I'm faded for some of these takes. Tell me if you think I'm on the money. Let me know. Let's talk about it. I'm really interested to see where everyone's opinions are on this. Alrighty, y'all. Well, good luck with your pick'ems. Hopefully I help give you some insight, and I will talk to you guys later. Yeah.